There's a darkness inside the human species and experience that pervades everything. And the older I get, and the more I watch people and watch events, the more I see it. And it becomes incredibly disturbing. And it may be the basis for many philosophies down through the centuries. It probably was. And I mean, I'm sure that Buddhists have thought of this, and the followers of Confucius, and all, this is not an old concept, but it's something that we really don't look at these days, and probably not over the last 70 years. But the darkness I'm speaking about is something called ego. And I don't mean the kind of ego you associate with a musician, running around the backstage like a diva looking for blue M&Ms. That's another thing altogether. That's just foolishness. But I'm just talking about basic human arrogance. And we all exhibit it all the time, every day of our lives, and we don't even realize it. And there's nowhere that it shows more plainly than inside the mind of a musician, of an artist, and in the way that some of us, me included by times in my own life, think that we are the center of every universe we encounter. Our leaders, no matter whether they be government or religious or people on pedestals in our own vocations and industries, they control us in a very odd way. And I don't think it's even control. They don't need to exert any control, because what they do is, it seems like everything they tell us, all the information they give us, puts us at the center of every event that's going on. They tell us that, some war in a country 12,000 miles away is happening to us. Because it's happening to them, it's happening to us. And that eventually that will spill over right into our front yards. And communism is a threat, and this is a threat, and that is a threat. And they keep telling us this when none of this is true. It's one thing to have compassion to see a little child blown up in Afghanistan or back in Vietnam or anywhere, any of these things. It's one thing to look at that and go, that's not right. And I feel terrible about that. But it's not happening to us. If we want to do something about it, that's fine. But that's not going to end up on our front lawn. It really isn't. And you might disagree with that. But there's all sorts of examples of this, that we're told that everything is about us, not us as a collective, us as individuals. And sometimes they even pick out, certain parts of the social structure. Well, The pandemic is going to destroy this industry and that industry and this one and blah blah blah. And they basically create an air of panic and all this other stuff, and the people in those sectors start to feel persecuted, and or like that the whole thing's happening to them. It's on their shoulders. Blah blah blah. It's been going on for hundreds of years. People saying, "Well, there's a political shift in X country, and that's going to affect everything we do here." And no, it's not. It just isn't. And I can show you. I'll tell you how it works in the music business. And there's so many examples of it. So many examples of it. The best example I can think of is, and I've spoken on this before, but when streaming first began, hundreds of artists came out and said, well, this is the end of the industry. I can't make money like this anymore, and blah, blah, blah. We're all done. No point in making records anymore because we're not going to get paid for them. So here's the problem with that. Number one, there's two type of musicians speaking out about this. One type is a band or an artist that has sold millions of records already and was used to getting $8 or whatever it was per copy. I don't know, whatever it is. They're used to getting full royalties for everything they did. And suddenly their music is being squashed and streamed and shot out of an electronic device in poor quality for people just to listen to because they love it. And they're not getting as much money anymore. So their complaint comes from arrogance. They're like, we deserve this. No, you don't deserve shit. You had your time. You made millions of dollars. The music you're complaining about is 40 years old. Fuck off. You've already made all your money, and people are going to keep licensing this music from you for different reasons, and you're still going to keep making millions. And you're still being played on commercial radio, and you're still getting $700,000-800,000 a year from SOCAN or BMI or whatever the case may be. Those people complaining is just complete bullshit, and it's arrogance, and I've talked about that before. I'll give you a good example. And I mention this man out of the deepest respect. And I've never talked to him about this, but actually I would like to. I hope sometime I get a chance to actually talk to him about it. But when streaming first started, the first couple of years, there was a guitar player named Don Ross, who I think is just genius. The man is a genius. I think he gave birth to a lot of players in the world, like Andy McKee and Sunga Young and all. Don Ross was an innovator that kind of took up the mantle of Michael Hedges and people like that. And the guy's a genius. He's made some of the best guitar recordings ever. Well, he came out on the warpath against streaming, and he used to post all the time about how horrible it was and people to boycott it and how his living was being destroyed and blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. But here's the raw fact of the matter. Don Ross, as brilliant as he is, and I can say this about any instrumentalist, me included, and I'm talking about right from Chet Atkins right down to Joe Blow that nobody's ever heard of. If you're an instrumentalist and known as an instrumentalist, and you make records as an instrumentalist, your market is about the size of a mouse's asshole. That's about where you're at. You don't have a prayer of ever selling, even in this country, I think, a gold record, which is only 50,000 units. Now, does Don have gold records? He might. I don't know. I never asked him. He might have sold a couple that were gold. But Other than that, it's it just doesn't happen. It's not. It just doesn't happen. We're in a situation as instrumentalists making instrumental records. It's such a niche market that we're just not capable of making that big a dent in the industry. And so his complaints about the streaming thing made me giggle. Because I was like, well, you, just like me, you make all your record sale money from going on stage and playing and selling records out of the back of the truck. That's how you do it. So how does streaming adversely affect you, right? It in reality, and I found this out quickly. In reality, it doesn't adversely affect anybody in our situation. It helps us because it puts our name and our music in front of literally billions of people that never heard of us. It's that old adage again about you're never as famous as you think you are, but you're always more famous than you think you are, right? So that is the type of thing that's been happening kind of across the board inside the industry, and this is one example of it, where, okay, so there's a new thing. Streaming is a new thing. But too many artists jump on this bandwagon about how, because Spotify only pays us 0.00038 cents per stream, that somehow destroys our careers. It doesn't. It has nothing. That's sheer arrogance. It's like, okay, so why? How does that keep you from getting in your car and getting to the airport and going to do 30 shows? It doesn't. It has nothing to do with your career at all. It doesn't. It really, honestly doesn't. And I'm not saying this out my ass because I'm living proof of it. And so are many other artists who just ignored all of that and remained an outlier and just kept doing what they do. I never, along the years, I don't even know how I managed this, but I think in the back of my head 20 years ago, I understood this problem with arrogance, right? And I've always ignored when someone tells me, well, this thing happened, so you're fucked. Sorry, that's not how it works. The guy didn't come to my front door and take all my records and punch me in the face and not pay me any money. That didn't happen. So what are you talking about? Why does that thing affect me? I got nothing to do with this. It's not changing the way I live my life, or the way I think, or the way I record, or the way I create, or any of these things. As a matter of fact, it empowers me. Because I don't have to answer to anyone except my audience. My audience is all that matters. So as long as they keep buying tickets and I'm still physically able to get in my car and go on tour and go meet all these people face to face from the stage, nothing is going to change. As a matter of fact, if they're streaming my music on these different platforms, which they are, how many millions of people are hearing my music just by accident when they put a playlist on a folk list or a Celtic list or a singer-songwriter list, and I end up in that list, which I do. They just heard my music and never heard of me and went, whoa, well, who's that guy? And then they start looking for me, and then they check the website, then they find the YouTube channel, then they find out I'm playing, 50 miles from their house. They're like, we got to go see that guy. Where is the loss in that? Right? Where is the loss in that? The idea that everything that happens is about us and potentially against us. it's just so much bullshit. It destroys your life. If you believe that, if you believe that something that is way over there is hurting you, you're just playing into the whole game. And it's not the way to live. Some of this limb today, some of this life in music today is going to become pretty profound, because I believe that this problem exists across every part of life, where we as individuals believe the hype of everything that we hear, and we make it about us alone, by ourselves. That horrible thing that's happening is my problem. It's affecting me, and I have to do this, this, and this, because that shit show over there is happening. But I'm here to tell you, it's not true. It just isn't true. One of the things that blows people's minds about me and a lot of other artists like me, the fact that I go out of my way, and have gone out of my way all my life, to help people in any way I could. I've had artists I've done things for artists, and they've looked at me and said, how can you afford to do this? How the industry is collapsing, and why would you help me take a part of your market? Blah, blah, blah. I don't understand how you can afford to do this. Well, the answer to that is really simple. I don't give a shit what else is happening outside. And I know that there's room for every human being. Anywhere they want to be, there's room. And when someone else succeeds, we all succeed. The positive end of this. It's like a paradox, right? The negativity that happens over there destroys us individually, but the positive thing helps all of us. And that's been my motto for my entire life, mostly because I've seen so many people in power turn down, the request for help. One of the reasons that I can do this, and another thing is I don't pay attention to any of that, and therefore I'm just still living in my own life. And it's like that old adage about, one of the greatest things I ever heard was somebody in the States once told me that they were so poor. This guy was an old man, quite old, in his 80s, and he lived through the Great Depression. And I was asking him about it, and he said, we were so poor we didn't notice there was a depression. Think about that for a second. Just think about that for a minute. And he wasn't making a joke. He was serious, but it was funny, but he was telling the truth. They were so disadvantaged and so outside society that when, the stock markets crashed and everybody went, tits up, they didn't even notice. They were so poor they didn't even see it happen, because nothing changed. And they did fine. They grew their own food, they did their own thing. That's what I'm talking about. If you're an artist, right? And so, okay, big deal, the industry just collapsed. If you've got your audience of however many you've got, what else do you need? You don't need anything. You just need to be able to go out and play. You just need to be able to keep writing and creating good records. And you go out and play, and you sell them for $20 a piece, or 15, or whatever you're going to sell them for. And that's it. Nothing changed. Because you're not part of that. That's a problem. And it seems like every time something like that happens, horrible, that they just send out every broadcast in the world to tell every single person that, okay, it's all over. Because we've imploded and can't do anything, and our hands are tied, and we just lost billions of dollars, you're fucked. You can't do this anymore. And the problem is that we tend to believe this. And it isn't just inside the music industry. I'm going to keep saying that over and over again. I just watched recently, a few years ago, I watched a close friend of mine split up a business relationship with a manager he had. And it was well over a decade they worked together. And this guy that managed my friend, when he split up with this guy, the manager called him up and said, you're making a big mistake. I'm doing a lot of things in the background here you don't know about, and it's going to be your career is going to go in the toilet, and blah 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 blah. And my buddy though said, no, well, I need to make a change, and and that's that. And the first thing that happened was my buddy immediately started to keep 20% more of his money, because that was being paid to Mr. Manager. And he suddenly became in control and in the know of his entire career. He was not out of the loop on anything. And his career made an upturn. And then he started doing some figuring. He's like, Jesus Christ, I paid that guy, $500,000 over however many years. And what do I really have to show for it? If this guy was such a shit-hot manager, why am I not a millionaire? If he was that important and doing that many things to raise my profile, right? But that was the mind game that this guy tried to play on my buddy. He was like, oh, you're not gonna be able to make it without me. The truth of the matter is that my buddy fell victim to the arrogance that the industry told him that he needed management, that he needed to pay this guy 20% of his gross income, everything he made. And that without that, he was less than inside the industry. If he didn't have a manager, he was... So there's my buddy walking around going, I need a manager. I have a manager. Well, why do you have one? Why aren't you playing on television? Why aren't you going to open for big bands? Like, why aren't you doing... you're a folk musician. What are you doing? Like, what's going on? Why don't you have, music on television shows and movies? And what's this manager guy doing? Well, you just need a manager. I need to do... And it's arrogance. It's all arrogance. And not a malicious arrogance, but an arrogance that you're told by outside forces that everything's about you. And if you're not important enough to have somebody managing your career, or good enough, or, well loved by the audience enough, or all these things, it all plays into the ego. And so my buddy, after X number of years, I don't know how long they were together, but he spent a fortune on this guy that managed him and got nothing for it. Nothing. His career was no further along after all that time than it was when they started together. But yet he spent all those years walking around going, I have a manager. Right. And then as soon as that manager dropped out of the picture, my buddy's career went through the ceiling. Because all that stuff they were telling him was false. It was a way of playing on the ego. You must have me, because if you don't have a manager, you're nothing in this business, right? Like, that's the deal. And it happens all the time. It happens all the time where you just you look around you and you see all these things that you believe are about you, and they're not about you at all. They're about a systemic norm that kind of keeps everybody at one level and under control. You know what I mean? Because when the outliers do stand up and go, screw you. I don't have to listen to this. I'm going to go play for my audience. And they go off and make their living a great living, and they leave a huge legacy behind musically. That's not good for the industry, because the industry wants us all to think that we can't do it without them, that we can't do it without radio, that we can't do it without labels, management, publicists, trackers. It's all about ego. They keep telling the artist, in order for you to be somebody, you must be plugged into this. It's that big machinery out there setting the systemic norm and then telling you if you don't fit here, you're nothing. And it's just not true. It is not true. And you could put this. I say the same thing about. I'll give you another great example. I've talked before on this series about my friends in the LGBT community. LGBTQ. I'm not sure what the rest of them are now. There's more and more of them. And somebody said to me, people have said to me, like, well, how can you, you're not gay. Well, and I'm like, look, buddy, he's my friend, okay? He's gay. I know he's gay. He's told me he's gay. But he's never brought his boyfriend or his husband or whatever and had sex on my front porch. You know what I mean? It has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with me. He's a human being. He has his own choices. He does them in private. I don't care. He doesn't come over and watch me in the bedroom with my partner. You know what I mean? Like it's these things that people that they keep telling us are affecting us. They're not affecting us whatsoever. Not at all. You know what affects you? Is when that poor gay person gets beat up or discriminated against or anything in your own community. That's a problem. That's when you stand up and go, wait a minute, that ain't going to happen. But what that person does in their own life has nothing to do with you. Not one thing. Because you're not involved in it. Right? And it's just, you can just slide this right across everything in the world right now. And as I said earlier, one of the benefits of not buying into anything like that is that you have the power individually to help other human beings. I'll give you an example that's actually happened to me. So there's an artist who was once managed by somebody that I knew, and they split up. And then, so that guy, I offered him to come to my studio and record with me at a hugely reduced rate because he needed to make an album. And so I did that, and it was brought up like, well, manager boy is going to be mad at you because you're working with me and doing this and that. And I was like, yeah, so what? What can he do to me? Oh, well, you don't want somebody like that mad at you. Well, why not? What is he going to do to me? Is he going to go and call all my venues and tell them not to hire me? Is he going to start calling my fans individually, all 80 friggin' million of them, or however many there are? He's going to call them all at home, tell them not to like me anymore? Is he going to keep me from being played on radio? Like, what kind of tool did he have that he can actually break into the door of my clubhouse, my personal clubhouse? You're not out in the world now. You're in my clubhouse. This is my place. I'll help who I want, and I'll do what I want. And I don't have to worry about repercussions from a guy like that who can't affect me because I'm not in his lane at all. I'm not even on the same road as him. I'm on the dirt road, going exactly where I intended to go, on my own time, on my own route. And like that's happened. I've actually been in situations where somebody said, man, if you do this, you're going to piss that guy off. And I'm like, well, so let him be pissed off. And one of two things happens, right? That person that I was potentially pissing off, and most times this is what happens, they did get pissed off, but it only lasted about 10 minutes. And then they were like, I got a lot of respect for JP. That was a ballsy move, and I got to give it to him, right? And I've actually made more friends inside the industry machine that way than kowtowing to them. I have a lot of friends inside the machinery, and that's how I did it. I stood my ground. I stood my ground. I did what I felt was the right thing by each individual person that I met, and I gained tons of respect for that. And there's no reason why we can't do that in everyday life. I mean, it's all allegory and these type of things, right? There really is something here that can be taken away into our lives, right? To close this off, I'm gonna go one step further, and I know that a lot of this might fall on deaf ears and may even be misinterpreted, but that's normal. One of the things that I've always been called, and people like me, artists like me, who are outliers, who are not part of the game, have maintained their success level and the trajectory of their career through their whole lives. There's thousands of us, right? We're in the minority. That's what we're called. Well, they're in the minority. These guys are not, they're not in the machine. They don't play inside the big box with everybody else, so they're a minority. The fact of the matter is that we probably outnumber the guys in history who have had major label deals and sold millions of records. I know we do. We outnumber these people. I hate that label. I especially hate that label when it's put on people. And again, we're talking about what we're told by everyone around us, what we believe, right? That we're told that, we're so important that there's a God that sees every single individual 24 hours a day for their entire lifetime. That's pretty arrogant. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And we're told that if you're black, red, brown, yellow, whatever color you might be, that you're a minority. And the worst one that I hate, worse than anything, is the term visible minority. I hate that. I hate it. Because it's labeling a group of human beings, right? That the reason they're a minority is because of a number. Think about that for 1 second. It's a number. There are less of them in a community than white people, right? Same thing we would be a visible minority in Africa, right? Or anywhere where the preponderance of the population is not white. So it doesn't mean anything, and it's degrading. It's degrading as hell that my buddy, and again, I have all kinds of friends in that world as well. My buddy who's brown or black or whatever, he's considered less than because of a number. Because there's not as many of his skin color in my community as my skin color. That is the most degrading, damaging rhetoric that has ever been introduced to the species. There is no minority in the world. We're all the same. And when we force that label on people, they believe it. They believe it, right? And that's not fair. The same way that, me in my 40 years of doing this for a living, continually being told that I'm on the outside and I'm never going to be let in. I rose above that because I refuse to listen to it. I refuse to be told that people didn't love me, that I wouldn't be accepted by the audience, by the world, because I didn't fit into that other group. I can tell you right now that you can absolutely fit into any goddamn group you want. You should never listen to any of that. And too many people do. Millions of people are trapped by this idea that they're less than because of a number, because their head count doesn't match something else that's more than them. That's not right. And everybody needs to start thinking like that. Everybody needs to think, okay, I'm not part of the large club, but that doesn't affect me, really. I just need to go ahead and do my life. And if I run into people who try to shut me out, go around them. Go around them. Don't let that stop you. Don't let that, it just doesn't matter. They can stand up and say, well, you can't do this because you're black, or you're red, or you're yellow, or you're a folk musician. You don't fit on the radio. You don't fit on the labels. You don't fit in this community, blah, 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 blah. These people that tell us this and force us to believe our own labels are feeding into our ego in positive and negative. When you're held down by it, your ego believes all of that, and you just get crushed inside, and there's no recourse. We all need to get over all of that. We need to start looking at, does this really affect me, or is it just these people talking bullshit over in the corner? I can do anything I want. I think that's true. I believe it, and I want to believe it for every human being. I don't think that anybody should ever look at the systemic norm and overlay it in their own existence. Just because that's being said, you don't need to live that way. And I see it every day. I see it every day with the First Nations. I see it every day with my friends in the black community and the Chinese community and the Indian and the Pakistan and all the people that I know. And I meet these people every day. I see them. I have friends that I work with in all these groups. It's just like, these are groups of people that didn't believe the hype, right? We need to start living inside our own lives, which will empower us to lift everyone else around us who isn't quite there yet. Because everybody can get there. Once that happens, then these machines that push out this narrative will start to have no power, and they'll just go away. Because that's what happens when you give something energy and allow it to just sit there and burn pyre 1,000 foot high. It just keeps spewing the same thing until you stop putting the wood on the fire. I loved what I heard Morgan Freeman say once. Somebody asked him, what do you think about Black History Month? And he said, I don't want Black History Month. Why isn't there a White History Month? Why isn't there a Brown History Month? Like, why are we talking about this? Oh, well, this is racism and blah. And he said, you want to stop racism? Stop talking about it. And it's true. You got to stop talking about it. Because talking about it leads to living inside it. And we all know that that's not necessary. I know it's not. A lot of us do. We need to start believing in ourselves, forgetting the hype, building our own life, and getting involved with the people directly around us. Don't worry about that shit show over there. That guy's house is on fire over there. He'll put his own house out. Let's start right around us in the circle that we have and start living outside all this information that's meaningless. We're all the same. We're all the same. We're all going to be born. We're going to live a certain time, and then we're going to be gone. And that's it. It's a heartbeat on the clock of the universe. There's no time. You think you get time, but there's none. So if you spend all your time believing that some external force is keeping you from becoming, to leave a legacy behind as a musician, or to leave a legacy behind in your family, with your kids, with anything, it's all a lie. It's bullshit. You can't believe it. And if we all get that, if we all start to get that and go, okay, well, all right, fine. You go over there with your thing, and I'm just going to do my thing over here. Don't worry about me. Go away. Just whatever. If you do that, we're all going to be way better off. Way better off. And I think the pandemic has opened a lot of eyes about how fragile life is and how all that, don't even get me started about conspiracy theories, because that's the biggest arrogance of all. That something is nefarious because they're trying to affect this one guy and that one guy, and all these people who believe a conspiracy theory are arrogant. They're like, oh, it's about me. They're trying to keep me from doing this and this and this. They want to control me to do this. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. You don't go there. It's all just noise. The idea is, here's what's happening. Here's what you can do, and do it. Right? Do it. Just do what you need to do to survive. That's the key. If you're not going to bother doing that, then what's the point? It's a confusing time, but at the same time, nothing ever seems to change. And the parallels between, the life of an artist and the life of anybody are surprising. I've been able to translate my life in music into my life, right? Itself, my normal everyday life, because I see things happen in the music industry that are an exact mirror of what happens to Joe Blow on the street. No matter who he is, whether he's a white man or a black man or a gay man or straight or trans or any of those things, we're all just victims of what we're being told. And if we stop taking that to heart as if it's only about us, and stop internalizing things that perhaps we haven't even experienced, that we're being told we're experiencing from way over there. Maybe we haven't even seen it ourselves at all, but we're being told it's happening. Now I feel horrible. Stop doing that. Ignore mean people. Don't fight them. They want to fight. I didn't fight to get into this industry. As soon as I saw I wasn't wanted, I walked away. It was the best thing I ever did. I didn't fight anyone, didn't care. I'm not gonna stand up and protest Spotify or Apple Music or any of those things. It doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to me because I kept doing what I do. And I kept helping people. I kept making people happy as best I can with my music. I've kept traveling. I just kept on doing what I do. I ignored that. And that's what we need to do in all of life. We need to be the best we can be. And if somebody tells you you're not, they're lying most of the time, 99.9% of the time. They're lying because they don't want you to be. It worries them when the outliers walk away and just do their own thing. It does. And we just need to start taking care of each other all the time, through all things, regardless of whether we're inside the machine or outside the machine. We're all equal. We all have potential to do something grand that might only affect the immediate people around you. Like, again, you're never as famous as you think you are, but you're always more famous than you think you are. You might do something in your life by ignoring all this noise that influences just one person. And then that person will do the same thing in his life or her life. And on the chain goes to where we start to live for one another. We don't live for the systemic structure. Start to live for one another. And as time goes by now, with everything that's going on, that is our only hope. It's our only hope. There is no other way out of this except together. No matter who we are or where we're from or what our belief systems are, we can only get out of this next 1,000 years, maybe less, if we do it together as a single organism. And that's my belief. This got really, really profound quickly, but I think these things need to be said. And I hope that no one's offended by my comparison of the music industry to life, but the parallels are too obvious. My situation as an artist is just a microcosm to the larger issue of just living. And I've learned a lot of things because I'm an artist and a musician, and I've applied them, and I find they work. So, again, just trying, all I want to do is just put all this out there and go, okay, guys, see if this helps your record sales, but also see if it helps your life, because it probably will. And that would be my biggest hope for every single human.